Most brides look at their reflection and see a fantasy. I looked and saw a crime scene about to happen. My name is Anya Sterlin now, but on my wedding day, I was still Anya Rossi, restoration architect. While 300 of the city's elite toasted our union in the opulent Sterling Estate ballroom, I slipped away to the butler's pantry. Not for nerves, but for the copper. For 92 days, I'd poured my soul into restoring that backsplash, stripping away a century of tarnish and neglect, polishing the hand-hammered panels until they gleamed like captured liquid sunset. It was my silent, defiant wedding gift to the estate, a piece of my sweat and soul embedded in their cold, gilded history. Now it would be my witness. In its warped, luminous surface, I saw her enter. Eleanor Catherine Sterling, my new mother-in-law, a woman who treated bloodlines like architectural blueprints and inconvenient people like structural flaws to be removed. She moved with the predatory grace of a panther in couture. She didn't see my eyes, wide and unblinking, watching her in the copper's distorted reflection. Her gaze was fixed on my champagne flute, abandoned on the marble bar as I'd fussed with the loose thread on my veil. A veil she'd accidentally snagged and torn with the sharp prong of her heirloom diamond ring just 3 days prior, whispering, "Clumsy me," with a smile that didn't touch her glacier blue eyes. Her movement was so casual it stole the air from the room. A glance over her shoulder toward the laughing, oblivious crowd, a serene smile fixed for an audience of none. Then the embroidered clutch. A small, cut-glass vial, no larger than her little finger, emerged, catching the light with a malevolent twinkle. With the practiced, unhurried grace of a society hostess pouring the finest tea, she uncorked it and tipped 3 clear, viscous drops into the heart of my bubbling champagne. The liquid vanished, swallowed by the golden effervescence. My blood didn't run cold, it turned to crystalline ice in my veins. Time didn't slow, it focused, narrowing to a single laser-precise vector, the 18 inches of polished mahogany bar between her crystal flute and mine. She recapped the vial, a soft click that echoed like a gunshot in the silent chamber of my focus. She dropped it back into the clutch's satin depths and glided away, seamlessly merging with the crowd to greet a senator's wife, her laughter now tinkling against my ears like shattering chandelier crystals. I didn't turn, I didn't breathe. I became a statue, a fixture of the pantry, until the moment her attention was fully absorbed by false admiration. Then, with hands steadier than they'd ever been, even when reassembling 1,000-year-old mosaic fragments by Braille, I reached out. I didn't grab, I exchanged. A simple, elegant transposition, my clean, untouched glass for her tainted one. The act was so smooth, so silent, it felt less like a reaction and more like the final, inevitable step in a design she herself had drawn. The poison was now in her hand, the die cast, not by fate, but by her own venom, redirected. Walking back to the head table, the world had a new, hyper-real clarity. I felt it in my bones. The static load, the immense, silent weight a critical beam endures right before it decides to bear the structure aloft, or snap, bringing the entire roof down. My pulse was a steady, controlled 82 beats per minute, a hum of pure, usable adrenaline. My husband, the words still sent a thrill through me, Ethan, reached for my hand beneath the damask tablecloth. His fingers, the skilled hands of a pediatric surgeon who dedicated his life to rebuilding shattered childhoods, were warm and certain. "You vanished," he whispered, his breath a soft caress against my temple. "Everything all right, my love?" I looked into his eyes, the color of a storm-tossed North Atlantic, and saw only a profound, trusting love. A love so deep, it was his greatest vulnerability. He could diagnose a rare virus from a speck of blood, map the delicate repair of a congenital heart defect, but was tragically, blessedly blind to the endemic pathogen that had raised him. "Perfect," I said, squeezing back, my voice a calm pool. "Just admiring the copper. The patina is holding beautifully." Across the vast, fragrant sea of white orchids and lilies, Eleanor was holding court. She caught my eye. A slow, venomous smile spread across her face, a crack in the porcelain mask. She raised her champagne flute, my glass, in a slow, deliberate mock toast. Her lips formed silent words I could read across the distance. "To your health, darling." The subtext was a scream. Checkmate. She took a long, triumphant sip, her eyes locked on mine. I raised my water glass, took a deliberate, slow swallow. The ice-cold clarity was a bracing shock, a baptism. I held her gaze, letting a small, enigmatic smile of my own touch my lips. "Your move." Eleanor believed herself the master architect of destiny. I was merely the temporary tenant, the lovely girl from the restoration site who'd somehow charmed her precious scion. 6 months ago, in the suffocating silence of her Georgian library, she'd slid a cashier's check for $250,000 across the vast expanse of her Louis XIV desk. "Think of it as a severance package, Anya," she'd purred, her voice like silk over steel. "You build things, we own things. This is simply the cost of saving you, and us, from future embarrassment. You'll never be comfortable at this table." I'd looked at the number, a sum that could have paid off my parents' mortgage, and felt not temptation, but a cold fury. I slid it back, the parchment whispering against polished wood. "You're severely underestimating the cost of labor, Eleanor, and the quality of the materials. I'm not for sale." That refusal wasn't rebellion. It was a declaration of war in a language she thought only she spoke. And in Eleanor Sterling's world, wars were won not with negotiation, but with total, elegant annihilation. What followed was her extinction burst, the frantic, escalating series of attacks when a narcissist realizes their usual manipulations have failed. The week before the wedding was a masterclass in covert sabotage. The florist called me, voice trembling, to say a Mrs. Sterling had tried to cancel all arrangements, claiming the bride had died in a tragic accident. My wedding dress, kept at the estate, was found with a long, malicious smear of dark grease across the bodice, and the veil, the delicate family lace veil, ripped with a force that spoke of pure hatred. I repaired it all. I used gold thread for the veil, a Kintsugi approach. I didn't tell Ethan. I knew the script. She would gaslight him, spin my evidence into the hysterical fantasies of a stressed-out bride. She relied on the sheer, breathtaking audacity of her actions to make them unbelievable. So when I saw the vial, the final, desperate detonation of her extinction burst, it didn't spark panic. It completed the circuit. The blueprint was finally fully illuminated. She couldn't stop the wedding, so she would ruin its memory, destroy the bride, and reclaim her son in the ensuing scandal. The collapse began not with a roar, but with a subtle, seismic groan only I was listening for. Eleanor was mid-anecdote, a story designed to highlight my parents' charmingly provincial background. Her words, sharp, polished daggers, faltered. A fine, almost imperceptible tremor traveled from her shoulder down her arm, vibrating the golden liquid in the poisoned flute. She set the glass down, the clink too careful, too controlled. Her famously porcelain skin, stretched taut over aristocratic bones, took on a waxy, gray pallor, like old candle wax. She dabbed at her perfectly painted lips with a monogrammed linen napkin, her eyes, wide now with a dawning internal horror, darting toward the garden doors as if calculating an escape across a suddenly infinite distance. "Mother?" Ethan leaned forward, his surgeon's instinct, that hyper-awareness of minute physiological change kicking in. "Are you feeling unwell?" "A touch faint," she managed, the words strangled. "The heat." She stood, gripping the carved edge of the table, her knuckles bleaching white against the dark wood. The movement was too sharp, too abrupt for a woman of her studied grace. Her knees, betrayed by the neurotoxin now coursing through her bloodstream, buckled. What happened next wasn't a genteel swoon. It was a full-scale, catastrophic structural failure. A guttural, profoundly unladylike sound ripped from her throat, a raw animal noise of pure physical revolt. She convulsed, one hand clawing at the elaborate silk chiffon over her abdomen. Then, in front of the governor, the hedge fund princes, the old money dynasties she'd spent 6 decades courting and dominating, Eleanor Catherine Sterling vomited violently across the pristine expanse of the head table. The eruption was horrifyingly public, acoustically wet and foul. A torrent of half-digested canapés and poisoned champagne splashed across the white Belgian linens, the baccarat crystal, the untouched filet mignon. The acidic, pungent smell hit the air instantly, cutting through the floral perfumes. A collective, horrified gasp sucked the oxygen from the grand ballroom. The string quartet's waltz screeched into dissonant silence. "Mom!" Ethan was on his feet in an instant, his chair toppling backward with a crash. He caught her as she crumpled, a shuddering, miserable heap of ruined silver silk and failing bodily control. Chaos erupted. Guests surged to their feet, a wave of confusion and macabre fascination. Shocked whispers exploded into panicked chatter. I remained seated for 3 precise, measured seconds. I watched the ruin unfold. I absorbed the beautiful, monstrous symmetry of it. This exact spectacle of public physical degradation and social death was the scene she had authored for me. The humiliation, the spectacular, reputation-obliterating downfall. Then I stood. My movement was calm, authoritative. "DJ, please cut the music," I instructed, my voice clear and firm, cutting through the din. I turned to our ashen-faced wedding coordinator. "Megan, clear a path to the main doors. Straight shot. The paramedics will need direct access. Everyone else," I announced, projecting my voice to the crowd, "please remain calm and give the professionals space to work." While Ethan was on the floor, his fingers on her neck, shouting about pupil dilation and airway patency to a horrified guest who happened to be a cardiologist, I was the calm at the epicenter. I directed human traffic. I fetched a bowl of clean water and a cloth. I was the portrait of concerned, efficient grace, the antithesis of the hysterical bride she'd hoped to create. As the paramedics arrived and efficiently loaded a barely conscious, groaning Eleanor onto the stretcher, her beaded Judith Leiber clutch slipped from her limp grasp and hit the hardwood floor. The delicate clasp sprang open. The contents scattered like guilty secrets: a tube of blood-red Chanel lipstick, a silver sterling compact, the small, now empty cut glass vial. And, as if fate itself were writing the denouement, a single folded sheet of heavy cream stationery embossed with the sterling crest. Ethan saw the vial first. Confusion fractured his professional composure, then dawning soul-sick horror washed over his features, leaving him pale. I bent, the silk of my wedding gown pooling around me, and picked up the paper. My heart was a steady drum. I knew what it was. I unfolded it, the crisp sound loud in the sudden hush. I didn't read it silently. I read it aloud, my voice carrying just enough to reach Ethan, the nearest paramedic, and my now stricken father-in-law, Charles. "To our beloved guests," I began, my tone flat, forensic. "We must beg your forgiveness for this unforeseen interruption. My new daughter-in-law has, with great bravery, battled certain private demons for many years. We had all hoped the profound joy of this day would keep those shadows at bay. It seems, however, that the strain of the occasion, and I am so sorry to say, an unwise indulgence in alcohol, have proven too much. I ask you from the bottom of my heart to extend your prayers and compassion, not your judgment. We, as her new family, will ensure she receives all the help and quiet support she so desperately needs. Thank you for your understanding." I looked up, my gaze meeting Ethan's shattered one. "She wrote a speech, Ethan. She wasn't just going to make me sick, she was going to wait until I was disoriented, vomiting, helpless. Then she was going to take the microphone, and with this, I held the paper aloft, tell 300 of the most influential people in our lives that I was a drunk, a drug addict, a mentally unstable wreck. She planned to bury me and then preside over my funeral as the grieving, gracious matriarch. The final hideous layer of her architecture was exposed. This was never just assault. It was a premeditated, meticulously planned character assassination, a social murder. The forensic audit and the surgeon's cut. The hospital waiting room was a sterile, fluorescent-lit purgatory. The air smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee, a stark contrast to the gardenia-scented opulence we'd left behind. Charles Sterling sat crumpled in a vinyl chair, his head in his hands, muttering a continuous low mantra. She's sick. It's a breakdown. She needs help, not handcuffs. My Eleanor. Ethan emerged from Eleanor's private room. He looked like a man who had aged a decade in an hour. His tuxedo was rumpled, his bow tie undone. He walked past his father's pleading form, past where I sat with perfect, quiet posture, straight to Officer Valdez, a weary-looking detective who had seen too many domestic tragedies played out in pastel corridors. "She's lucid," Ethan reported, his voice stripped of all emotion, a flat, clinical instrument. Her official statement is that she acted to save me from a cunning, gold-digging sociopath who would have bled the family dry and broken my heart. She expresses no remorse. She expects gratitude. He then reached into the inner pocket of his tuxedo jacket, the fabric pulling taut. He produced the cream-colored note, now sealed in a clear evidence bag provided by the officer. This was found on her person at the scene, premeditation in its most literal form. She drafted her narrative before executing the act. This document demolishes any potential psychological defense. It proves cold, calculating intent. Charles shot up from his chair as if electrocuted. "Ethan, for God's sakes, she's your mother. Can't you see she's mentally ill? This is a cry for help." Ethan turned. The love and respect that had always softened his gaze when he looked at his father were gone, replaced by a forensic, unsparing coldness. "Illness, Dad, might explain a cry for help. This," he said, tapping the plastic-covered note with one finger, "is a calculated, tactical strike. It's malice with a blueprint. It's a trap with a press release. If you hire a team of lawyers to defend this," he emphasized, "you are not protecting a sick woman. You are becoming an accomplice to attempted murder and slander." He turned his back on his father's stricken face and addressed Officer Valdez with absolute finality. "I am pressing every possible charge: aggravated assault, poisoning, criminal endangerment, conspiracy, and I am formally requesting a full, permanent restraining order for myself and my wife, effective immediately." He took the pen offered to him and signed the formal complaint. His signature, usually a flowing script, was sharp, angular, and devoid of flourish. It looked like it cost him a piece of his soul to write. It was the most devastatingly romantic, the most horrifically beautiful thing I had ever witnessed. He wasn't just choosing me over his mother. He was performing radical, brutal surgery on his own history. With the precision of the surgeon he was cutting out the cancerous, parasitic tissue to save the life of the whole organism, our marriage, our future. The Golden Seam, 1 year later. Eleanor Sterling was sentenced to 36 months in a white-collar correctional facility. The pre-written speech was the masterpiece of evidence that sealed her fate. You cannot successfully plead temporary insanity when you've had the presence of mind to compose your alibi and your victim's obituary in elegant cursive days in advance. We did not move into the cavernous, haunted Sterling estate. We used a fraction of my own savings and a modest, untainted gift from Ethan's great-aunt to buy a historic, crumbling brownstone on the other side of the city, a structure with magnificent, solid bones, but a troubled past, cracked plaster, and outdated systems. It needed patience, care, relentless hard work, and a vision for what it could be. It needed us, like we needed it. Tonight, on the first anniversary of our wedding, the one that began after the ambulance left, I sit at our reclaimed oak farmhouse table. The only sounds are the soft hum of our new refrigerator and the distant, comforting rumble of the city. Before me lies a ceramic bowl, a simple, beautiful wedding gift from my Nona. Last week, in a moment of clumsy joy while dancing with Ethan in our unfinished kitchen, I'd knocked it from the counter. It had shattered, not into dust, but into 7 clean, jagged pieces. I am not discarding it. I am practicing kintsugi. I've prepared the urushi lacquer, mixing it with fine, luminous powdered gold. With a brush as fine as a sable hair, with hands that are once again steady, not with adrenaline, but with peace, I begin. I trace the seams of the breaks, filling each hairline fracture, each gaping wound in the clay, not to hide them, but to highlight them, to illuminate the history of the break. The philosophy is deceptively simple, profoundly beautiful. The break is part of the object's history. Repairing it with precious metal doesn't disguise the damage, it transforms it. The object becomes more beautiful, more valuable, and infinitely stronger for having been broken, and for the care taken in its mending. Ethan finishes washing our simple dinner dishes and comes to stand behind me, his hands resting gently on my shoulders. He watches my work in silence. We don't speak of the wedding often. Its shadow is not a ghost in our home. It is woven into the very gold of our foundation, a hidden, strengthening filament. Eleanor tried with all her might to find the fault lines in us, to exploit the natural stresses of any union. She tried to shatter me to prove I was weak material, unworthy of her son's legacy. She failed catastrophically because she misunderstood the fundamental principles of both restoration and of love. True strength isn't in never being broken. It's in the deliberate, careful choice of how you put yourself back together and who you trust to hold the pieces while you do. Our marriage has a golden seam running directly through its heart. It is visible if you know where to look. It is undeniable. It tells a story of betrayal, survival, and a love that chose to rebuild with consciousness and art. It is, without question, the strongest part of us. I apply the final stroke of gold, sealing the last fracture. The bowl sits whole again on the table, but it is utterly transformed. Where there were once fractures, rivers of gold now catch the warm glow of our pendant light, blazing with a defiant, luminous beauty all their own. It is no longer just a bowl from my grandmother. It is a testament, a promise, a silent, shining victory. And it is unbreakable.